So the much anticipated Blue Angel has just been added to Duel Links, and with her, of course, comes her signature art type, Trickstars. And I'm not gonna lie to you, I'm exceptionally disappointed. I was really kind of hoping that Konami would have learned from their mistakes in the TCG and released some kind of cool skills to make this art type that has a bunch of elite monsters that basically never saw any play IRL because everyone was just more focused on playing the Stage 3 Cancer variants, that they'd actually release some skills that would make these cards actually playable and usable in this game, rather than just whatever these were meant to be. Alright, hear me out. We're going to give you a skill that allows you to move your Trickstars to a different monster zone. You mean like Monster Move, the skill you've already given us. But this one lets your opponent draw 3 cards. Now, don't get me wrong, Trickstars is definitely going to be a decent deck in Duel Links. Maybe not top tier or tournament level worthy, but it's definitely going to be a viable deck for you to play on the ranked ladder. But unfortunately, it's going to be way more reliant on the Trickstar main deck monsters than the links themselves. In other words, the deck list I'm about to show you, it's pretty cancer. So here's today's deck list. Now, just a reminder before I go through the deck list, if you're enjoying today's video and want to see more content just like this in the future, especially new box content, as I still have a whole bunch more in the pipeline, including Paleo, Water Xyz, maybe some Mermail or Atlantean. So if you're interested in any of that stuff, or if you happen to be a returning viewer, as apparently about 50% of the people watching this are even subscribed to the channel, then nearly all of you are returning viewers who have seen my stuff before. So you find yourself keep coming back to the channel and want to see more content from me in the future, remember to leave a like on this video and consider subscribing to the channel down below. Alright, let's get into the list. So this deck list has 6 main deck Trickstar cards, with the most important one being your Candina, which is basically just the searcher for the deck. When this card is normal summoned, add 1 Trickstar card from your deck to your hand. Each time your opponent activates a spell or trap card, inflict 100 damage to them. So normally you'll be summoning this card and searching for one of 2 Trickstar cards, the most common one being your Lycoris. This card is a quick effect, you can reveal it in hand, then target 1 Trickstar monster you control, except Trickstar Lycoris, special summon this card from your hand, and if you do, return the other card back to your hand. Each time a card is added to your opponent's hand, inflict 100 damage to them. So this card is absolutely mental in this deck list, as it essentially allows you to just dodge all of your opponent's back row, and also recycle your Candina to use it on future turns to keep searching for more cards. The other card you're going to be searching for a lot of the time is going to be your Corobane, because basically this card is what makes this deck list actually functional. It's basically a hand trap, and it also has a special summon effect to become a free body on the field. Whenever your opponent or whenever you try to battle one of your opponent's monsters, you can send this card from your hand to the graveyard. That monster you control gains attack equal to its original attack until the end of the turn. So if you ever swing in with any of your monsters, or if your opponent ever tries to swing into any of your monsters, you essentially just double the attack, having like 4,000 attack Holy Angels or 3,600 attack Candinas. It basically means your opponent can't actually get over any of your monsters with like 99% of the deck lists in the game. And the other effect of this card is if you control no monsters, or if all your monsters are Trickstar monsters, you can just special summon this card from your hand. So if you activate your Candina, you search for this card, you can either use it as a hand trap to protect yourself, or you can even special summon it straight to the field, and then go into various link plays. Speaking of link plays, we also have your Lilybell. This card, whenever it is added to your hand except by drawing it, can special summon itself to the field. So essentially, normal summon Candina, add this card to your hand, will then simply special summon itself to the field, allowing you to go into any Link 2 card that you like. Or you could use its second effect, where it can actually attack your opponent directly, and when it inflicts battle damage to your opponent, you can target 1 Trickstar monster in your graveyard and add it to your hand, which is a great combo to go with your Lycoris, because your Lycoris can actually return cards to hand. So obviously, returning Lilybell to hand will allow it to special summon itself to the field again, and then attack your opponent directly again. So essentially that's 1600 damage, and you get 2 free bodies on the field, and I believe this card's second effect isn't actually once per turn, meaning you can actually add yet another card from graveyard back to your hand. Then we have your Nightshade. This card I'm only running at 2 copies, as essentially it's a 1 card a Link 2, but you don't really want to go onto your Link 2s going first, or even sometimes going second, as your best normal summon is always going to be your Candina, and then you're going to be searching for generally one of these 2 cards. So you don't normally want to summon out a Link 2 on turn 1, unless you absolutely have to. This card is just a fantastic follow-up plays on any of your following turns, simply because it's a 1 card Link 2. If this card is sent to the graveyard as link material for Link Summon a Trickstar monster, you can special summon this card from your hand, but banish it when it leaves the field. So essentially, normal summon this thing out, go into your Link 1, it will bring itself back to the field, and there's 2 resources to go into any Link monster that you like. But like I mentioned, generally your best normal summon is going to be Candina, so you don't want to see this card all that often on turn 1. It's generally just a fantastic top deck, or a fantastic play after you've had your initial turn. And the final main deck Trickstar card is your Light Arena. This card, if you link summon a Trickstar monster, you can target one Trickstar monster in your graveyard that was used as material, special summon it in defense position, but negate its effects. Once per turn, you can target one set card in your opponent's spell and trap card zone. While this card is in the field zone, that set card cannot be activated until the end phase, and your opponent must activate it during the end phase, or else return it to hand. So essentially this card is pretty good at, once again, making your Link 2 plays. But because this deck list, like I mentioned in the intro, isn't super about making your Link 2s early, and it's more about just kind of adding Corobanes to hand and continuously recycling your monsters, you don't really need its effect all that often. It's just kind of a nice effect to have, especially if you've already searched for a Corobane or if you already have the Lycoris in hand, and you don't really have a search of Candina. Searching for this card is a great option. Also, it's a good card to search for as just simple back row removal, as it does obviously stop your opponent activating some of their set cards. Now let's move on to the extra deck. So this extra deck basically has 3 cards you're going to be going into fairly actively, with the first one of course being your Bloom. Bloom, like I mentioned earlier, is just going to be used in combination with your Nightshade to link climb into your various Link 2s. Its card effect, you can basically pretend doesn't exist, since it's just trying to give your opponent a free card draw, which, unless you have your Lycoris on the field and your opponent has exactly 100 or 200 life points left, we're not going to be trading 100 points of damage for a free card draw. That is never worth it. So pretend its effect doesn't exist 99% of the time, and just use it to link climb into your Link 2s. Speaking of which, we have Holy Angel. Each time a Trickstar monster is normal special summoned to a zone this card points to, inflicts 100 damage to your opponent. Trickstar monsters this card points to cannot be destroyed by battle or card effects. If your opponent takes damage by a Trickstar monster's effect, this card gains attack equal to the damage they took until the end of the turn. Now we're only actually playing one of this card, as although it's kind of your biggest beater in this deck list, like I mentioned earlier, the whole purpose of this deck list isn't necessarily to go into your Link 2 super quickly and just beat over your opponent. It's going to be just outvaluing your opponent with your main deck monsters, as you'll see during the gameplay. So summoning this card isn't something you do very often, especially considering you want to be using your Lycoris to return your cards back to hand. You don't really want to be trying to return your Link monsters back to hand, as it just puts them back in the extra deck. So summoning this thing out isn't something you're going to do all that often, but it's good to run at least 1 copy, as it is the biggest beater you're going to be making in this deck list, especially if you manage to keep it on the board for 1 turn. Then you can go into various Link plays in combination with its Link arrows, and make this thing gain a decent amount of attack. And now we have the actual best Link 2 in this deck list. We have your Crimson Heart. This card is insane for this particular list, and works insanely in combination with what you want this deck to do. Each time a Trickstar monster is normal or special summoned to a zone this card points to, you gain 200 life points. You can discard 1 Trickstar card, both players draw 1 card. But if your life points is at least 200 higher than your opponent's when this effect is activated, you draw 2 cards instead. So essentially, this is a discard 1, draw 2. It does give your opponent a draw as well, but that isn't too bad, as basically this deck list wants you to get as much value as you possibly can. And being a deck list revolving around hand traps and trap cards, being able to draw cards, especially with things like Karma Card in the deck list, has insane value. And because we don't like any of the Trickstar skills, we're actually running Fairy Smile, which means every time we draw a Trickstar card, we actually gain 1000 life points. So we gain a shit ton of life points, get ourselves above 2000 over your opponent, and then this card's effect becomes draw 2 instead of 1, and becomes an insanely valuable card in the list. As for the rest of the extra deck, honestly, it's not all that valuable. Your Diva's kinda good at trying to lock out your opponent if you already know they've got a low amount of life points. You can summon out your Diva, make it so that if your opponent ever tries to normal or special summon a monster, they'll just kill themselves slowly. So this is kind of a good card to sort of lock your opponent a little bit, but it requires your opponent to really have such a low amount of life points that I'm not really sure it's all that worth it. It might just be better to run a Security Dragon over this. And as for your Link 3, this card is... honestly, if this wasn't a Trickstar deck and I wanted to try to make it more competitive, I'd probably just chuck in a Ningirsu instead. As this card, it really doesn't do a whole lot and you'll be summoning it very, very rarely. It essentially just does a bunch of burn damage based on how many cards your opponent has already on the field. But to do it just like 600 burn damage or like 300 burn damage normally, it's just, for a Link 3, that's just, it's not really that great. Honestly, it can be a nice card to sort of finish games sometimes, but like I said, I think I'd run Ningirsu over this if I was trying to be more competitive rather than trying to fit the Trickstar feel, which is kind of the only reason I'm running the card. Alright guys, that's going to do it for the decklist portion of the video. The rest of it will be gameplay showcasing this decklist in action, and without further ado, let's get into it. Alright, let's get into the replays. So with this particular decklist, I went 9 wins and 1 loss, which is a pretty good scoreline. I did technically lose a game before this, but it's because it was my first time using this decklist and I didn't actually read what the card effects did, and I made a mistake that I'm not going to mention on camera, so it actually had nothing to do with the decklist itself, so we're not counting that one game. All the other games were actually really damn good though, so yeah, 9 wins, 1 loss isn't that bad. Unfortunately though, I will have to, confess, the actual replays or the decks that I played against, they weren't exactly the most competitive, so it's kind of hard to say how good this decklist actually is. Like, playing this in a tournament, it'd probably get absolutely slaughtered by Salad, especially considering it's like a grind decklist and Salad is like the king of grinding. But against a lot of other decks, it's probably not that bad. Alright, so this was against, I think, Vampire, which is not a deck you expect to see in 2022. Alright, so into a bunch of vampire-y stuff, search for a spell. I forget what half these cards do as I haven't seen them in so goddamn long. Summons out of Utopia and passes. I'm going to set a bunch of cards, normal summon my Lycoris and pass the turn. I could have actually summoned out my Corobane, then if my opponent had some back row, he would have tried to chain it to my Lycoris. I could have summoned my, he would have tried to chain it to the Corobane. I'd activate Lycoris and dodge the back row. But in this case, I wanted this card on the field, because I know my opponent's going to add a bunch of cards to hand, and I want that little bit of burn damage, which is pretty damn relevant versus Vampire, which need to use their life points as a resource. Alright. And luckily, I didn't actually swap them over, because then he had a Kaiju in hand, which would have been pretty bad, as I really want my Corobane in hand. Alright, Sorcerer, so he can summon out his big boy, suck up my dude, but thankfully I have a Crackdown, so I just yoink it, and now I can't do anything. Alright, Samurai Skull, sending another dude. We still can't do anything because he has no removal. So I Tribute Summon over with my Corobane. Swing into his Utopia, negates it, return it to hand with a Lycoris, swing in again, negates the attack with Utopia again. Still continuing to do burn damage to him, he goes into Utopia Ray. We still have back row, so we're just going to Floodgate trap all that. Swings in, Corobane, 3200, and his Kaiju just died. Fairy Smile, another 1000. Normal summon this card, he can Canadius it, which is kind of annoying, but from this point on, I think he realised he only has one card left, his other card's Floodgated, he doesn't really have a chance. Alright, on to game 2. So yeah, I think this decklist is really strong in that its grind game is essentially really good. It's just, it has kind of a bad matchup into current meta, because obviously the best deck in the game is a grind deck, and it's way better than this one, so it's kind of hard to say how good this decklist actually is in comparison when there's decks like that exist. It's basically just a shit version of Salad. Alright. So I'm going to be normal summoning out my Nightshade to go into my dude, because we didn't have our other normal summon, our Candina, so you might as well just go into a Link 2 instead. Going into our Crimson Heart, which will give our opponent a draw and lose one of our cards, but it will give us potentially another trap card since we didn't actually draw any. Unfortunately, we still didn't draw any off the draw anyway. He did activate a DD Crow, which he could have just used on my level 1 monster, which would have stopped me going into my Link, so I'm not really sure why he used it on the Lycoris and not on the... Either way, it just kind of shows the stand of ladder players. Don't run DD Crow if you don't really know how it works. Alright, moving on. Alright, summoning out my Corobane. This is because I can add it to hand whenever I like, so I'm hoping my opponent might try to target it with a card effect or something. And also gives me just a swap for my Lycoris whenever I want it. Which will give me 400 life points by summoning it to the zone this card points to. Or 200 life points? Sorry, 200 life points. My opponent was playing, I think, Dark Magician, so Not exactly the greatest deck. He tries to book him my monster. I can now swap it out. Give myself a bit of life points, hit himself in the face. Thankfully, I don't actually think he had any Dark Magician summons yet, which is super useful for me, because I don't actually have any dodges left, so I couldn't dodge if he activated his Circles effect. Navigation summoning out his 2 dudes. Circle banishing my monster, which is kind of annoying, but it's alright. Because we have a Crackdown to yoink his rank 7. Fairy Smile, another 1000 life points. Drawing 2 cards now because we have more life points than our opponent. Now you'll notice my opponent actually only has 200 life points, so he's pretty damn dead from here, no matter what he does. In fact, I think I tried to swing in with my Candina in a second, which was pretty troll, because I forgot this card was on the field, he protects himself. But that literally does not matter, because I can just summon my Lycoris from hand, putting it on the field. And as soon as my opponent draws a card, he's essentially just dead. Alright, on to the next replay. Next up we have Aluka. So I forget what this guy was actually playing as well. I recorded all these much earlier this morning, so I kind of forget what they were all playing. I know there was a Blue Eyes replay in here somewhere. Don't be fooled, this guy definitely wasn't playing Trickstar. I forget what he was actually playing there. I just know this guy was a... yeah, he was a fraud. Oh, that's right, he's playing Warrock. Alright, which is actually a surprisingly good deck list. You've seen this deck actually top some tournaments recently. Alright. So, normal summon my Candina, search for my Corobane, because we already have the Lycoris in hand. Set my trap cards and pass. Goes to battle phase before he swings. I'm going to steal his big monster. He tries to econ take my monster in response. Obviously, we can dodge that with the Lycoris. Then when he tries to swing in, Corobane's in hand, Ionster is protected, and his monster is now, well, not dead because he's field spell. Alright, normal summon the Recycle Candina, search for another Corobane. Swing in, beat over his monster, he activates a Jelly Cannon. Which is fine, because we still beat over his monster anyway. And from here, he's well out of resources, and we've still got a shit done. We can go into Elite 2 if we like, he summons a monster in defense. But we have a Karma card ready for that, so we're going to go Bloom, summon out our monster back, go into our Elite 2, go into our Holy Angel. Karma card, remove his monster, and he's dead. Alright. I've never actually tried playing Warrock, maybe I should. The deck list looks kind of fun. Alright. Now we have Neo Physical. Now this, I actually do remember this one. This was against Necroz, and I played this pretty badly, I think. I'm not really sure how I was meant to play this, but I thought it was a pretty good back and forth replay, so I decided to save it anyway. But yeah, this shows that I'm definitely more of a YouTuber than a competitive player. Alright. So search for his Necroz dude, go into his Necroz, and pass the turn back to me. From here I'm going to summon my Candina, searching for my Lycoris rather than searching for my Corobane. So I'm kind of scared he would activate the Gungnir and destroy the card before I could actually swing into his monster. Maybe that was bad, maybe I shouldn't have searched for this, but I decided to search for the dodge anyway, and set my 2 cards. And so I Karma card, try to destroy his card, he negates it, I try to Crackdown it, of course he's going to destroy the Crackdown. But at least now he can't pop my monster as well, so we can swap it out. Maybe we could have swapped it out anyway, but he can't destroy a monster now. And he is using a lot of resources here, so I was kind of hoping he'd just run out of resources before me. Candina searching for another Lycoris. I could have searched for my other monster here, but again I was kind of scared he'd target my card and destroy it. But maybe that was good, because then I could activate Karma Cut and during his turn and banish his card, so I think I probably should have searched for a Corobane here and not delayed, but either way, set my Karma Cut. He should destroy it before I get this effect off. Once again, I'm going to swap these 2 over. I think this time I searched for... no, I searched for another Lycoris. Again, didn't search for Corobane yet. Still making him use a lot of resources though, so it's basically a top deck war at this point. And I hard draw a Corobane this time. Alright, Candina searching for a Lilybell, which will summon itself back to the field. Try to swing it in, unfortunately our opponent decides to destroy that, which means we can't get value off of it, which is pretty annoying. But now I can beat over his card. Which was probably a bad thing, because now he gets to be able to search for his mirror. and summon out a really big Necroz. Which, if we didn't have our skill going, we actually would have just died instantly. So summons his dude, gets rid of all my value, and now we're back to square one. But it's easy, because we'll just top deck anyway, right? So, just draw into our Candina, it doesn't really matter. Normal summon Candina, search for Corobane, beat over his monster. And now we're back to being in the lead again. Draw into a Crackdown. Not going to beat over his monster because I'm kind of scared now that I know he has a nice little spells that like to have effects in Graveyard that give him resources if he has no monsters on the field, so I'm not going to beat over his monster. I definitely should have cracked down here though when he was about to link summon. I could have stolen off his 10,000 hands because I was assuming he was going to link summon here. I just decided I was going to steal the link monster instead. Not sure why I did that, as it meant that he would have no monsters on the field, so probably not the best play. Alright, set my Floodgate trap wall. Yeah, I definitely played this deck very badly, but thankfully, I don't think he played his very, the way he played was very great either, so. This card target back, Crow? If so, that was really troll. Oh, it's only face-up cards, okay. I guess he didn't play it that badly, I was the one that just played really awfully. But it's alright, I can special summon my Corobane and he's dead. Never misplay. Alright, final gameplay. Alright, this must be the Blue Eyes player. My nose is actually so goddamn itchy, but I don't want to scratch it on camera, because then people will think I'm picking my nose. It's actually suffering right now. Alright. So cards of constants, drawing some cards. Ancient Runes, summoning out his Blue Eyes. And here's where I'm going to absolutely fat bait my opponent. So rather than summon the Lycoris, I decide to special summon the Corobane to try to bait out my opponent's back row. Of course, he uses Bottomless, I can now swap it over, and we just dodged his back row, made him waste a card. And he goes into his Cypher Dragon, I'm just going to yoink that for myself. Fairy Smile, 1000 life points. Summon it to the field, search for my Light Arena, which basically just means I can now target his card and say you can't use that anymore in case it's like a Drowning Mirror Force or some bullshit. I probably had some kind of lethal this turn, but who really cares? My opponent is very dead from here. Yeah, this is what you get for trying to play Blue Eyes in 2022. Summons out his Blue Eyes alternative White Dragon, which is definitely going to survive on the field. Summons it out. And it's gone. By the way, I didn't actually mention this. The reason I'm running things like Karma Cut and Crackdown is this deck list needs to have removal. It doesn't have any innate removal in its kit, so it's very important you actually run some removal yourself. So things like Karma Cut and Crackdown just fill that kind of, that niche the deck list needs, because it doesn't actually have any innate removal. Alright. You also notice that I think there's another trap card you probably saw in some of the replays that I was running in here. I don't think I drew in this one. But there was the Trap Tricks trap card I was running. I don't run that card, I was just trying to test it out. Karma Cut was way better, so I ended up just using a Dream Ticket on the Karma Cut once I'd finished my 10 games. I didn't actually use it in any of the replays, so it didn't matter. Alright guys, that's going to do it for today's replays. I hope you guys enjoyed them. If you did, remember to leave a like, subscribe, all that kind of stuff, and hope to see you guys in the next one. Laters.
Hey, big brother, can I watch SpongeBob?
Shut up, Mokuba. I'm busy flagging YouTube videos to compensate for the fact that I have an extremely small penis.
Oh.